Hello and welcome back to another painting tutorial offered by Garden City Arts. My name is Katie Guthrie and I'm going to be walking you step by step through this very fun fall inspired painting. So before we get started, let's quickly talk about all of the things you're going to need. If you bought the painting kit, everything is provided except for the paintbrushes. So let's just go through our list real fast. You want a cup for water, paper towels, your canvas that needs to be painted light gray, and all of these paints. If you got the painting kit, they are numbered 1 through 9, and I just lay them out in an order, kind of like in a ring, around my palette on your foam plate, and have them all ready to go. Then you'll also want to have your paintbrushes and your piece of chalk. So if you have everything, then you are ready to proceed with your video. Now, the way we're gonna break this down, I'm gonna show you this painting in, I think, about 7 or 9 steps. I can't remember exactly how many. And I'm going to show you what to do, show you some tips and tricks, and then I'm going to put up on the screen the finished product and the step that we're on right next to each other. That will give you an opportunity to pause the video so that you can take your own time and maybe perfect a few things or go back and rewatch that step again. Once you are ready, you can proceed to the following step. So that is how the video is going to work. If you have all of your supplies, you are ready to get going. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with step number 1. So with this painting, we're going to work on the background and then we're going to work our way up to the foreground, which will be our fox and the leaves and all that good stuff. So let's get that background laid out. First, grab your biggest brush. I have a 1-inch wash brush that works really well. You want to prime it by dipping it in paint water and then patting it dry on your paper towel. This helps keep your bristles together and it will give you a better painting experience and easier control with your brush. So we're going to start with the light gray. That is going to be the first color we put down. And I want you to think of painting up and down, so lots of vertical lines. And I want you to think about putting in kind of curvy lines that curve outwards. So think of your light source as being the center of your canvas, and everything as it goes away from the center gets darker. So I'm going to start with this gray. It is a little bit darker than the canvas. If you notice it's dry and scratchy, what you do is you dip your paintbrush in water and mix some of that water into your paint. That helps make your paint a bit more fluid and easier to work with. So I am laying down some fairly transparent layers of paint, and notice how I'm going pretty fast. Big brush strokes, don't overthink it, just go for it. And all of my lines are curving as they get to the outer edges of the canvas. So here we go. I'm just laying out a layer of my light gray, which might look a little dark on the canvas at first, but it will look like light gray after a moment. Then I'm going to jump right into white. I'm not even going to rinse off my brush. And the white is where we're going to put our light source. So right in the center, that's where we want it the brightest. Now, as it goes out, we can use less and less of this white and maybe space it out a little bit so that it'll give the illusion of like trees fading into the background. We're painting a forest scene and we're trying to get the illusion of a whole bunch of trees, but we really don't want to spend all that time painting all those trees. So we're doing a nice painting trick. So I'm spacing out my lines as I come away from my light source and making it darker on the edges, lighter in the center. Okay, just like that. Once you are happy with your background, you can proceed to start putting in your first row of actual trees. Now these trees, because they're so far away, aren't going to be very detailed. So it's a really fast, quick step. So I'm just finishing up my background. I'm pretty happy with it. And now I can start putting in a new color, which is going to be the medium gray, or the darkest gray on our palette today. And I'm going to use my brush at its very thinnest point to give long, somewhat thick vertical lines. And again, I want to make sure that these are kind of spaced out. You don't want a pattern, however, you don't want a tree, spaced tree. So I'm going to put in some short trees in between, maybe put some branches up higher. Again, it's very, very indescript. We're not putting in a whole bunch of details, okay? Just giving the illusion or the impression that there are trees back there in the distance. We're making our forest feel full. Okay. Now, something you want to think about, check in with the bottoms of those trees and make sure that they go down, not all the way to the very bottom edge, but below the 1/3 mark of your canvas. The reason for that is we're going to put in some ground, and if the ground doesn't cover up the base of your trees, you're going to have some floating trees, which might not be exactly what you're looking for today. Okay, so there we have it. That's it. I'm going to pause the video so that you can see the end result, the goal that we are hoping for, and the step that we're on, and then we will resume with step number 2 in just a moment. Okay, ready for step number 2. Now, we have the background done. We're gonna start working on the mid-ground elements, and in this painting, that would be the ground, okay? So when we put this ground in, make sure it's not too terribly high. I put it about 1/3, and I don't want it to be a straight line. I want it to be just slightly curved. To me, that's just a bit more interesting, but remember, this is your painting, and you can do as you wish. So I'm gonna take my biggest brush, since I have a lot of area to cover, and I'm gonna take that medium gray, or the darkest gray that we have on our palette, and I'm going to start by drawing in my horizon line. Okay, horizon line is where your sky meets the ground. So again, I made mine a little curvy, and then after I have that in, I'm going to paint everything below the horizon line dark, well, medium dark gray. So after I've used the top edge of my brush to draw the line, I can use the side of it to kind of fill up space and cover up all that canvas. Now, there's kind of a 2-part step to this. After you have the dark gray laid out, you can move right into this is called burnt sienna, and you can put in just a little bit of the burnt sienna, especially right along the horizon line. I used my brush, kind of the side edge of it, and I do a little zigzag line. And you can do that before your paint dries. That way you can have a nice blend of color. We're doing a wet on wet painting blend technique here. And the idea is to cover up everything below with your dark gray, and then put little pops of the burnt sienna in. So I'm going to pause the video, show you what it looks like, and give you an opportunity to pause and get caught up, and then we'll resume. We're ready for step number 3 and for a new color of paint. We are going to start putting in some trees that are closer to us and that are a bit more substantial. So one thing we want to do is to have a variety of trees, some thinner, some thicker, and I want you to not stress out too much about these trees. They're going to be really simple, basically trunks that go into V's and maybe with 1 or 2 branches coming off. Very, very simple trees. Now, higher up on the horizon line, they're going to be smaller trees. So thinner, smaller trunks. Closer towards us and lower on the canvas are going to be bigger trees with much thicker trunks and much thicker branches. All of these trees are going to go up and off of our canvas, okay? So we will not see the ends of the branches. So I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. You could continue using a big brush if that's the one you would like to do. Because I'm switching to another brush, I'm gonna prime it by dipping in paint water and patting it dry. And now I'm gonna grab some of my black paint. Now, I know that my black paint likes to dry pretty fast, so I'm mixing a little bit of water into the black so that it's a bit more fluid and easier to use. You don't need globs, you just want a nice thin amount or coating on the top of your brush. I'm using my brush, turning it to its thinnest point, and I'm gonna draw long vertical lines for my trees. The trees in the back, if you mix a little bit of extra water into your paint, that's fine. That'll make them a bit more transparent. The more water you add to paint, the more transparent it is and less heavy and opaque. Okay, so those trees in the background can be lighter. And to make them look lighter, you mix water in your paint. So, I'm gonna go ahead and start maybe like right on the horizon line and make a nice tall tree. Now, I didn't mix enough water into my paint to show you what that transparency looks like, so I'm gonna try that again. With a little bit more water. There we go. So mixing water into your paint will make it more transparent and therefore make the paint look a little bit lighter if you're painting on a light surface. Okay, now when you draw the branches, try not to draw them at a 95 degree angle. That doesn't look quite right. Instead, you want acute angles, so smaller than 90 degrees. 45 degrees is a really good angle for tree branches. That gives them a nice realistic look. I'm going to put in another tree right here. Going up and off. That one's a nice transparent tree. And make sure that the bases of your trees are nice and thick. And then I'm going to show you how to put in one that is really close to us. It's kind of the main tree that we're fixating on. I'm going to do a nice curvy line for the base of my tree. So he's going to be a big trunk. And then I'm going to make a nice curvy big tree. Trees don't have to be straight. And I'm going to make him a little bit gnarlier and a little bit thicker at the base. And bring his base down just a little bit more. So I'm using the top edge of my paintbrush to create the outline, and then I can fill him in using the side edge of my brush, working from the edges to the inside. Okay, just like that. I am going to finish up adding all of my trees. I'm going to add about 7 trees. I also want some of them kind of coming off. So I'm going to go ahead and put my trees in really fast, and I'm going to pause the video, put up the end result and the step that we're on so that you can work at your own pace. All right, let's do this. All right, we're ready for step number 4, and this is where the fun part of the painting really begins. We get to start adding in those leaves, and we get to do it one color at a time over the next, I'm gonna say 3 or 4 steps. So very first color we're gonna do is green. We're gonna use a shader brush, so we are switching to a smaller sized brush. The shader looks a lot like the wash brush, but it's just smaller. And I'm going to focus my green kind of at the top of my trees, and then I'm also going to put in just a little bit on the ground. That way, as we build up our color, you'll see the green popping through at all levels. So with my green, I'm going to add quite a bit of paint. I'm going to focus really on the top edge, and I'm going to start dotting in my leaves. Now, the trick with leaves is to not overthink it and to not be too concerned about having them stay really close to where the tree branches end. Trees are big, they are oftentimes see-through, and a lot of times you see the tree leaves, but you don't actually see the branches. So it's okay if they don't actually make a connection. If you have some like weird floating leaves, it'll make sense. I'm going to really cluster some at the top And then as I come down, I'm gonna leave a little bit of space and then start clustering again, fixating or focusing in little areas, making little clusters every once in a while, but making sure that I don't have really discernible shapes. So what I mean by that is I don't want a nice perfect circle, okay? That will turn into like a poodle tree, or a square. That's even worse, okay? That's a boxy poodle. We don't want that either. So I'm going to instead add little tumors to disrupt any shapes that might be appearing. I can use the top edge of my brush, especially as I get to where the leaves will start falling. I can add, just with the top edge of my brush, add these little lines for like falling leaves. And I can use the side of my brush to really fill in space. So again, I'm focusing quite a bit on the top edge of my canvas, and really green is the color you probably use the most because it's the very first one and it's going to get covered up quite a bit and we still want it to be visible. Notice I'm putting some leaves on top of my trees. Yep, that's okay. Like on top of the trunks, that's okay. That's a good thing, okay? Now, I have my leaves up here done. I'm gonna focus on my piles of leaves down here. I'm not gonna put a ton over here because this is gonna be my empty space. There's not a lot of trees. Your canvas might be a little different because remember, this is your canvas. You may have put in your trees a little different, that's fine. Do what makes sense and what looks good to you. I can start covering up maybe some of the trunks of the trees in the background. I'm not covering up any of the big bases of the tree trunks in the foreground though. Foreground is what's closest to us, or closer to the bottom edge of the canvas. So just gonna put those in just a little bit. And then once I'm happy, I'm gonna move it on. Make sure you get your brush nice and clean. We're gonna continue using the shader brush. So I swirl, tap, and dry my brush. And let's move on to the next step and the next color. Okay, we're on step number 5 and we are continuing to add lots of leaves, but now we're gonna shift to a yellow. Now, the yellow can be on top of the green in certain areas, and it can also create new areas kind of below where you left off with the green. So bring your leaves even further down your trees, not to the point where you're touching the horizon line. If you do that, that's too close. Back up, okay? And remember, you can use the top edge of your brush to create the illusion of leaves dropping, and the flat edge of your brush to cover up more space. Don't cover up all the green. We worked hard on that green. If you covered it all up, it would be a waste. You can cluster just like we did before, but keep in mind you want little pockets of the background, I guess, showing through. You don't want it to be perfect. Okay, I'm just gonna keep tapping and pull up the finished product screen so that you can go at your own pace and perfect and get it looking exactly how you want it. Okay. All right, you should have yellow in the sky, you should have yellow on the ground, and we're gonna move on to step number 6. We are continuing with our leaves, but we are adding a new color. We're now introducing orange. Now, word to the wise, from this point on, when we start putting the orange and the red on, you want to make sure that it really does not interact with the green. So it doesn't go up high. It stays down low. It kind of stays on top of the yellow areas, and try not to mix any wet green with wet orange or red. The reason for that is that orange has a lot of red in it, and red obviously has a lot of red in it, and red is a complementary color of green. When you mix those two colors while they're wet, they make brown. And while this is autumn, we want the beautiful autumn colors as opposed to like the sad brown colors. So we're gonna start adding our orange, keeping that fact in mind that we're staying on top of the yellow and kind of away from the green. If you want, you can even go further past where you left off with your yellow. That way you don't cover up all the yellow. And at this point, I'm not putting on a ton of the orange. I'm kind of starting to lighten up. We used a lot of yellow and a lot of green. The orange and the red are not used in the same way. They're more of the accent. Now, I am gonna put in quite a bit of the orange falling leaves over here. So using the top edge of my brush to make those little tiny lines. Make sure you put some orange down on your pile of leaves, just like you did with your yellow and your green. And then we're gonna move on. I'm just gonna do a few touch-ups and then we'll move on to red. Okay, so this is the very last step for our leaves. We are putting in our last color, which is our red. Now, just like with our orange, we're just gonna go in slowly and put just touches of red. We're not going too crazy with it, and remember, we're avoiding green. We're keeping our colors nice and clean and not turning them into mud by mixing complementary colors like red and green. Okay, so just put some pockets of red in there. If you haven't done so, and remember, you can always go back a step. Like if you feel like you need to have more yellow concentrated so you can bring in more orange and bring in more red, no problem. Just pause the video, go back a step, no stress. I am making sure that I have leaves piled up around the bases of the trees to make it seem like these autumn leaves have really built up. It is farther into fall and the trees have really started to shed. Okay, once you're happy with your red touches, not doing a ton of red touches, just a few here and there, we're ready to move on. We're ready to move on to our fox. So, good job so far. Make sure you clean out your brush really well, and let's move it on to the next step. We are ready for our very last step, which is to put in our fox. Now, I'm going to show you how to draw it with your chalk. Make sure that your canvas is nice and dry. If you need to, you can take a bit of a break. You worked really hard on this painting so far. It has to be nice and dry or else the chalk really will not leave a mark. Okay, so we're going to break this fox down into some basic shapes and then go back in and add some more details. Make sure your fox is sizable. It shouldn't be too tiny or else it's going to be really hard to paint. I'm going to start my fox nice and up high, and I'm going to start by just doing what looks like kind of a curvy triangle, okay? The top has kind of a curve to it, and then I put in two curvy sides. Next, I'm going to make a teardrop shape that starts right underneath my triangle. See, like I said, make sure your canvas is completely dry. I should have taken my own advice. And next, we're going to put in a curved line for the fox's tail, and a second curved line to give that tail some volume. Okay, now, this teardrop can't be too terribly big, or else your fox is gonna look like he's been eating a lot of hens in the hen house. So you wanna make him a little bit skinnier. I come in after I have my basic shapes and I put in a chest, bring that line back, and then put a nice line for his leg right there. Now, let's do some perfecting elsewhere. These basic shapes were just to kind of help guide you. I'm gonna shorten his tail in some places, maybe make his tail a little bit more pointed in others. I'm gonna come over here to his face. I'm going to erase some lines, and then I'm going to sort out what is going to become his nose, which is the left side of your triangle, and what's going to become his ear, and where I'm gonna put the white in for his belly and his chest. Okay, all those other details we can kind of sort out as we go. If you need to affect your fox a little bit, you can. Just pause the video. And then when you're ready, we're gonna take our round brush. A shader brush will work, but it's gonna be harder to maneuver, so I would highly recommend the round brush. Make sure you go ahead and prime it by dipping in paint water and patting it dry. And then we're going to go back to all of these colors that we had on our palette, almost all, except for the green, and we're gonna use them to build up our fox. We're gonna start with the white, and we're gonna start putting in the tip of the tail. Remember, the lines are just guidelines, so don't feel like you have to do exactly what your chalk lines, don't feel like your chalk lines dictate exactly what you do. I'm going to kind of alter it as I go. So I have the tip of his tail. Now I'm going to come in for his chin and his neck and his chest. And the good thing about this fox is that you can make him kind of furry, or her, I guess, and not have super clean lines. And then I'm going to bring that in, and even though the feet aren't going to remain white, I am going to paint in white to start off with. We'll come back in with black in a moment. So there's foot number 1 and foot number 2. And a little bit of belly. Remember, paint covers paint, so yeah, if you feel like your white might have gotten a little too crazy, that's okay. You can cover it up. Okay, so I have my white. Now I'm going to start in with my orange. Then we'll go with our red, and then we'll finish with our black. So our orange, I'm going to start right where I left off on my white. I can overlap the two a little bit. And the orange in your kits has a lot of white in it, so it should hold up pretty well and cover up a lot of the paint. If you mix your own color and your orange is very transparent, you can always take a little bit of white and a little bit of orange, mix it on the palette. The orange gives it more body and makes it more opaque and less see-through. Okay, so I'm painting just a little bit more of his body. I'm not going all the way to his back, but pretty darn close. His ear is the next big hurdle that you need to think about. I'm going to put in his ear using my really, really light orange that I kind of mixed on my palette. And I'm also going to go to his tail and start covering up maybe just a little bit of that white. Ooh, my tail might be a little bit too big, but that's okay. I'm going to bring that tail almost all the way around to where his bottom will be. Also cover up the bottoms of his feet. And now that we have some of the orange established, we're going to move right into our red. Remember, you can always come back in and put the orange on top of the red if you feel like it's just too red for a fox. Okay, or you can mix colors on your palette and mix a little bit of extra orange into it. I'm going to start establishing his back now. And remember, this fox is furry, so little short, quick, choppy brush strokes are okay. And having not a clean edge on your fox, but kind of a fuzzy, rough edge is also kind of a good thing. He is fluffy. I'm going to paint just a little bit of the back of his ear, a little bit of his head. And then, of course, you got to establish the bottom and his back and kind of figure out the in-between. I like to layer, so I put down some red. I'm going to come back in with another layer of orange and just really get that nice fluffy furry coat. And if you're running into a problem that I'm experiencing right now where he's kind of blending into the leaf pile, one, we could probably justify that by saying, you know, he's the same color as the leaves, so it's not a bad thing. He's sitting on a pile of leaves, no big deal. Or we can fix that when we get to the black. So there are options. Also, you'll want to make sure that if you have too much white like I do, you're kind of scaling it back. Okay, there we go. I'm going to swirl, tap, and dry my brush because we're going to move on to the black and gray. I'm going to start with just a little bit of gray on his legs. I'm throwing a lot at you, so remember, you can always pause the video, go back, play it again if you need to. It's a good thing about videos at home. Okay, now I want this chest to have just a little bit of gray in it. And now for the finishing touches, the black is basically what adds his details. So his black legs, or black paws that disappear behind his tail. We need his black eye, his black nose, and the black on his ears, which are the backs of his ears. Now remember, paint covers paint, so if you made a mistake like I just did, no big deal. You can fix it. You can fix it, it's no big deal. Now, the black, if you are really bothered by the leaves, you can come in with some black on his bottom. What you'll have to do is put another layer of red on top of it, and that's basically you're just making like a dark red so that it sticks out. If it gets crazy on you like mine just did, well, swirl, tap, and dry your brush. Add another layer of paint. No stress. Remember, you can always add a layer of paint. Sometimes you have to clean out your brush. It's a good problem solver. Sometimes you have to let your paint dry. And then, you can come back to it. It's kind of a fresh mindset. Okay, I'm just gonna fix my ear and then I am finished. That's it. Our fox painting is done. I hope you had fun with this. This is one of my favorite paintings. It is a blast and it kind of gets you in the mood for fall. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. Thanks for watching, and please help Garden City Arts thank our generous sponsors.